Welcome aboard once again to the High Performance Human podcast. It's Andy here, and I am delighted to have you guys on board. I'm also delighted to have a guy who's joined us from up in sunny Queensland via the US. Chris Helder is a international speaker, best-selling author. He's written a whole bunch of books, most of which I have read. And I don't know if Chris knows this. He's actually one of the very first educators that I saw when I first started in real estate. I don't know if he knows that. There you go. Yeah. So, and the whole spaghetti at the wall thing is something that I still say now in terms of throwing ideas, right? So, Chris Helder, though, he is an international speaker. Talks one of his best-selling books, amongst all of the great work that he's done, is around useful belief. How positive thinking is not exactly the best thing in the world, but useful beliefs certainly are. And is the way that he talks. If any of you had the fortune of hearing Chris speak, he is one of the most engaging speakers you are ever likely to come across. Chris, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on board the High Performance Human podcast. How are you today, sir?
Thanks, Andy. What an amazing introduction. That's fantastic. How good is that? And it's great to be here.
Look, man, pleasure is all ours. I was really keen on having you jump on in this first sort of stint of the podcast because my knowledge of you and having been connected with you for quite some time, you do tend to get in front of and speak to so many different audiences, industries, demographics, the big, the small, the old, the young, and you would have seen a whole cross section of human beings that would help you sort of identify traits around high performance and so on and so forth in a holistic sense. Before we crack on into that, though, Chris, I really want to ask you, firstly, for the few people that don't know who you are, give us a bit of a rundown as to who you are and what got you to this point in your life.
Oh, good. I grew up in the States. I did grow up in Colorado, which is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And I finished university there, studied psychology, sociology, went off to California, and I wanted to work with underprivileged kids. So I spent 2 years working in Compton, straight out of Compton, Andy. And anyway, but that was amazing. And from there, I actually did meet an Australian girl who we ended up getting married, and she lured me over to beautiful Australia. Geez, that's going back a long time ago now. So I've actually been in Australia for over 25 years, and I do pinch myself at what I get to do because I get a chance to, travel all over the world and talk about people and high performing people. And I get to talk about ideas and, make people laugh and make people think. And it just gives me great joy to be able to do what I do every day.
And I think the way that you broadcast your messages and your thoughts and your ethos around certain things I'm not exaggerating this, gang. If you do get an opportunity to see him talk, do it and there's content of yours. I think you've got TED Talks on YouTube and whatnot, I think.
Yep.
So make sure that you get around his stuff because he is actually one of the most engaging people. And he talks about very heavy subjects in a very light way that actually permeates through the mind. I'm sure some people listening to this would be able to understand and resonate with sometimes you go to some of these talks that are about life or, about belief systems and everybody just assumes it's going to be all rah-rah pom-poms and stuff that you're just going to go in one ear and out the other. But the stuff that Chris talks about, very much spaghetti at the wall. Some stuff will stick and you make sure that you don't touch the stuff that hits the floor. Now, Chris, the big hard-hitting question, and not going to lie, everybody's answer has been absolutely stellar, so no pressure. But my definition of a high-performance human comes down to 4 elements. It is success, connection, influence, and happiness, and no one can survive without the other 3. Tell me, in your decades, I don't want to make you sound old, mate, but decades of experience dealing with human beings, what is your definition of a high-performance human?
Well, it's a great question, Andy, and I bet everyone did answer it a little bit differently. And, I suppose keeping it in vein with my ideas around useful belief, I'm obviously very big on everybody's got a reality. And so therefore, everyone's situation is completely different. And, because we all have a reality, I always look at, sometimes we may want to change things about our reality. That's possible. And sometimes we can do that. And you can set goals and you can set off a different direction. But the reality for a lot of people is there's a lot of things that either won't change or can't change. And so I really look at high performance humans and really take a look at what your specific reality is. What are you willing to change? What are you not willing to change? And what can't you change? But really, when you take a look at that, you go, this is what I'm doing right now. And so now it becomes, how do I maximize that performance every day? So again, I see so many people who just try to get through the day at work and they're not happy at work and they don't like their job, or they're unhappy at home, or they're unhappy physically, or their body, they're unhappy on any level. And, you really take a look at it and go, well, hang on, if you're not going to change it or can't change it, what's your useful belief about it? And then we put together, well, a pattern of behavior or a series of habits that really are going to help you to maximize your performance within the bounds of your reality. So not everybody's going to be the same. And I guess I've been really big to say to people, I've seen tall, successful people. I've seen short, successful people. I've seen wide, successful people. I've seen skinny little itty bitty successful people. But here's the thing. You know what? Everyone can have their own system in place and make it work, right? Some people are going to work at night. Some people are going to work in the morning. Some people are going to be more technologically sound. Some people are going to be more human savvy. And again, when we take a look at it, I think when you talk about high performance, the first thing is identifying, this is my reality. These are the things I'm not going to change. This is actually going to be how I'm going to live my life with a level of acceptance about what it is. And then from that point, put a series of habits together that are really going to put you in position where you feel fulfilled.
Man, it's a very different take on the question to what some other people have really come up with. Some people have just tried to hit the definition out of the park, but I love how you've really put it into the context of everybody's individual reality. And that's a really, really good way of articulating. It's a really, really good way of articulating how success looks different to so many people, right? Success looks so different to so many people. And the problem that we've got is the fact that we're not going to blame social media, but there is that perception, that sort of blueprint of what success looks like by definition.
Sure.
And I think that until we understand our own reality, then how on earth are we going to be able to understand what high performance actually looks, feels, sounds, tastes like, right?
I agree, Andy. Look, I'm 5'8". I am 53 years old, and every year I check to see if the Los Angeles Lakers have actually drafted me this year. Right? I figured this is the year they need a point guard, just to dish things up a little bit to Kobe. But here's the dish things up to LeBron now. But the reality of it is this, right? When we take a look at it as a Lakers fan or a basketball fan, that's not going to happen. And I think, again, so looking at it, and while that's an extreme example, what at the end of the day are my reality? What are my boundaries? What are the things that I am capable of doing? And in that, how do I now take that and push that and maximize that?
Right. So this conversation is going to go down a different track, gang. Already, I can feel it coming, and it's going to be an awesome one. Now, this one's going to get real practical real quick, I feel. And Chris is a very practical man, and he's delivered a lot of practicality to a heck of a lot of people, which is another reason why you need to go and watch him and on a stage, whichever stage you can possibly get to see him on. Chris, when you've mentioned the word habits quite a few times there when you've talked about how to maximize the performance of yourself within your reality. And before that, though, you talked about identifying your limitations or boundaries, for want of a better word, and really understanding and interpreting what that reality looks like. Talk us through that for a second, because, so for example, in the real estate space where we first crossed paths, you undoubtedly would have come across the stereotype of what success looks like. And in business sense, it's governed a hell of a lot by gross commission and what have you. But a lot of those high top earning commission writers, a lot of them are they are having to sacrifice other elements of their life that are really important, whether it's family, relationships, whatever the case may be, in order to get to that perception of high performance. In terms of understanding limitations and boundaries and so on and so forth, How did you ever come across a moment in your own life where you were like aside from when you didn't get the call from the Lakers this season, um, um, which is a damn shame, by the way.
Right.
But aside from that, was there a moment in your life where you really had to stop and sit and go, shit, I need to really understand my own boundaries and, my own sort of environment in order to really understand how I'm going to go forward here?
Well, I think, Andy, first of all, and don't get me wrong or hear what I'm not saying. At the end of the day, you have to be able to walk, be able to crawl before you walk and walk before you run. And I think with all the real estate people that we used to talk about, and at the end of the day, it's fine to say, I want to write $1 million worth of gross commission. And that's a fine thing to say. But if you're just starting out and you're 3 months into the business, it's probably not realistic. And you're probably setting yourself up for failure. And it's probably not a useful belief at the end of the day. So again, when I talk about it, doesn't mean those boundaries can't change. Again, when you get to year 3, year 4, year 5, and if that's what's truly important to you, then at the end of the day, those type of numbers, can be achieved. And again, I've seen all sorts of different people do it. To me, real estate, for one, is that combination of learning the business, learning the market, being expert at what you do, delivering a message with certainty, delivering a message with simplicity, and following a process and continuing to follow that process every day. Most people in real estate can do a process for 3 months and they get tired and, they can't sustain it. Obviously, I've worked with most of the top real estate agents in Australia, and many of them in America. And the reality is they follow that process with a relentless passion every day, all day. And they do it again the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day. And that's the thing that most people can't do. And also the thing most people don't want to do. So again, we've got to identify what's important. I really break it up. I think there's a few different areas for people to think about what their boundaries are. I think number one, because this is a podcast designed for work, let's just say work is one of them. I think it's very important. Work's an important part of our life, I believe. And again, that doesn't mean I didn't just say money is the driving force behind that, but having pride in yourself, having pride in what you do, taking ownership over how you're going to spend a working day. Those things are huge, right? And that's a huge part of our identity as humans. The second thing, obviously, is family. And again, you mentioned that boundary gets crossed all the time with successful real estate agents, that they somehow are unable to balance those two things. And that's not unique to real estate. Hey, in 2019, I did 174 presentations and I rode on 168 airplanes. So listen, I understand that sometimes those things, don't always stay in balance. The third thing is health. And again, some people that are high performance humans, they spend incredible amounts of time focusing on their health, incredible amounts of time focusing on running, focusing on biking, focusing on swimming. They're triathletes, and they spend hours and hours and hours and hours every day on that focus. So there's 3, and then I think we've also got 2 other ones that are huge. We've got friends, and I think there's community. And I think we take a look at those 5 things: work, family, health, friends, community. And we could probably throw a selfish one in there, and I say selfish, it's an important one. Number 6 would be me time, and really having time for yourself. So like I look at these 6 areas, and I think it's a really nice 6-area thing to go, what do I want? Like, what do I want? And I can tell you, Andy, what I want in 2023 and 2024 is very different than what I wanted in 2017, 18, 19. It just is. My kids have finished school. I have a very different life than I had 6 years ago. I live in Noosa. I lived in Melbourne. I've made some transitions in my life, which are very different. And, so it's really a beautiful place to be in right now. But those 6 things that I just talked about, when you talk about work, you talk about family, you talk about health, you talk about, community, and you're talking about friends, and you're talking about me, individual time. Those 6 things are in a totally different proportion right now than they were in 2017. And that's good. Right. I mean, it was also good then. There's not a right or a wrong answer to the question, right? What it is however you break that up, then you decide, how am I going to be a high performance human within the confines of how I'm going to divide my day? But the one thing, I'm going to be in control of it. I want to be empowered, and I want to be the one that's calling the shots.
Now, did you feel like, so when you had that year when you did 160 odd or 168 flights or whatever it was, Did you feel particularly high performing back then, or did you feel that it was all in one area and none in another?
Well, I think at that time, you could look at it a couple ways. Yes, I think I was incredibly high performing. And again, I think you can look at that and say, would I want to do that in 2023? No, I wouldn't. Not at that level, because that's not the distribution with which I wanted. Of course, hindsight, we can always go back and look at it and go, hey, I probably had that in a level of disproportion. But you got to remember, Andy, if I did 170 presentations, I knocked back another 170 presentations because I didn't have time to do them, or I was double booked, right? So it was just this level of work that was, sort of where my focus was. I think it's very easy. I had 3 kids in private school at the time. I had, I was living the Melbourne lifestyle, man. I think we had 2 Range Rovers and a big house and all the stuff that goes with that. And, it was just a very different time before, obviously the pandemic hit and the speaking industry took a massive hit, and perspective shifts and perspective changes. I consider myself a very high performing human, generally speaking. I just don't think of those. It's just in a little bit of a different order of importance right now.
I want to talk about habit forming as well now. So, before we talk about habit forming, like I've mentioned to you guys that are listening in, Chris is, for me, and I don't know if this is true in terms of his actual sales or anything, but Useful Belief for me is the book that really hits home with so many people that either I've worked with, have spoken to, I know of. A lot of people have been touched in some way, shape, or form by this book and by this concept. For those people that don't, we've mentioned useful belief before, but just break that down just very, very quickly for us. What is a useful belief? How does that compare to positive thinking? And why have you really influenced a hell of a lot of people by this concept of useful belief?
I mean, it's pretty amazing now, Andy. Wiley Publishing told me that's the highest selling business book in Australian history in that category. It's pretty amazing.
Oh, wow.
And the book is a little book, and you work with a lot of speakers, and a lot of speakers. Those other speakers make fun of me because it only takes an hour to read. They call it a pamphlet, Andy. They call it a pamphlet, and I just tell them it's a best-selling pamphlet. It's an easy read. But the premise, again, is very simple, and the premise is very simple. It is basically, positive thinking is not sustainable. So if I walk up to you and I say, come on, Andy, be more positive, man. Try to be positive, right? Your first reaction will probably be to be defensive. You'll be like, hey, and even if you try to be positive and you go, come on, Chris, just be positive today. You can do this. That by 10 o'clock, when something bad happens and you are no longer able to sustain that level of positivity, right? The studies show you actually feel worse about yourself than when you even started, right? You're like, I can't even do positive well, right? So there we are. So instead, it's not about positive, it's about useful, because positive thinking is emotional thinking. Negative thinking is emotional thinking, where useful thinking is practical, it's pragmatic, and it's result driven. So really it becomes this: what's my most useful response to the situation I'm in? What's my most useful response? What's my most useful action? And you can drive your entire day with this to be a high performance human. What's the most useful thing for me to do right now? What's the most useful way for me to structure my day from here? Now, extrapolate that out to belief systems. Obviously, every single person, we all have something called a brain filter, which is a reticular activating system, which shows you what you see in the world. It decides what you see. And the example that's obviously been used, I've always talked about, is a red Toyota. You probably drove recently. When you drove recently, you didn't see any red Toyotas on the road. If I said to you, we're going to buy a red Toyota together, you'd go outside right now, get in your car, and you'd see a red. By the time you went, they're everywhere, right? Now, here's the thing. Now, that's your reticular activating system, but it's no different. So you're totally in charge of it. So the second distinction, positive thinking doesn't really help you. The second distinction is most people get truth and perception confused. So, for example, I say this is the best time in the history of the world to be alive. Is that true? Well, some people are like, no way, Chris. No way. When I was a kid, we were real kids. We had a great time to be alive. Back now, not now. Or some people would be like, yes, it is. Either way, right? They would say, is it true? Well, truth is irrelevant on that question. It's perception, right? So all of a sudden we put way too much weight on what we think is true. And instead, like, this is the best time in the history of the world to be a kid, right? If I said that to you, you might be like, no way, when I was a kid, now they got computer games and iPads and we were real kids, right? But here's the thing. Is it true? I don't know. I've got no idea. But I know this. When I believe it's the best time in the history of the world to be a kid, an amazing thing happens. I'm a better dad. So it's a useful belief because I'm not thinking about another time frame. I'm thinking about the year 2023. I'm present right now, right? This is the best time in the history of the world to be alive, right? Well, guess what? When I believe that, my reticular activating system, my brain filter, it walks out there and what's it see? It sees a tree and a flower and a puppy and a baby, and it finds beautiful things in the world, right? So now, obviously, we're talking about high performance humans here. A lot of people don't subscribe to this, the best time in the history of the world to be in your industry. Because when I say to you, this is the best time in the history of the world to be in your industry, your brain opens up, that brain filter opens up to the opportunities that are out there. So ultimately, I believe you cannot be a high performance human without a useful belief. Because when you believe it's tough times, the second you go, these are tough times, Eddie, these are some tough times, getting tougher, cost of living, Armageddon, right? This is the end right here. Look, soon as I believe that, my brain shuts down. You're no more opportunities anywhere. Soon as you go, there's no customers out here, your brain shuts down, right? You stop finding opportunities. This is the best time in the history of the world to be in your industry, best time in the history of the world to be alive, best time in the history of the world to be a parent. And whatever your situation is, so it brings me back. Let me loop it back. Again, take a look at those 6 areas of your life that I call your reality, right? This is the best time in the history of the world to be in your industry. That's work. Best time in the history of the world to be a parent if you're a parent. Or if you're single, it's the best time in the history of the world to be single. Best time in the history of the world to help the community. Best time in the history of the world, right? ... Whatever your situation is, then ultimately we take a look at it and go, change it. Or if I can't change it, what's my useful belief about it? What's my useful belief? And then you can prioritize how you want to put all those things in order. But ultimately, you're in control of it. You're empowered by it. And you've got a useful belief about the world that there are opportunities everywhere. And your brain will go find those opportunities.
Geez, guys, I think you need to listen to that bit 2 or 3 times, because what Chris just delivered then was it's the hall pass. It's the gold key. It's whatever you want to call it, man. Like, because when we're talking about, because motivation is so temporary, it's such a fad thing. It's such a very temporary rush of dopamine that just doesn't get you anywhere really, right? And we talk about how we've talked about in the past about how high performance humans, they have this innate ability to generate motivation internally. Now, whether that is through, blind belief or self-belief or whatever the belief is, it is a useful belief to them in that moment in their lives. And therefore, it generates a level of momentum that allows them to go and execute to a greater degree than anybody else, or anybody that's just looking up at them, feeling sorry for themselves because they're not in the best time of their lives to be doing whatever it is that they're doing. Now, Chris, question off the back of that though. Have you been in a moment in time where you've really had to check your useful beliefs and go, man, these are not useful anymore?
Good question. And, again, I said that's always going to move. It's always going to change. But to answer that question is important because obviously, in 2020, March 2020, I had an incredible year lined up, as many speakers did, but I particularly did. And I was going to US and I was going to Asia, all over Australia, New Zealand, and I was really excited. Had a lot going on. And, when COVID hit, my emails came in. It went postpone, cancel, postpone, cancel, till it got down to 0. And that made me a little bit sad. And I worked something out, Andy. No one likes a sad motivational speaker. I just want you to know that. All right? In fact, people try to give you advice. They're like, why don't you read your own book? And but the truth is 2020 changed so many things I mean, it blew the speaking industry apart, right? I mean, and all of a sudden there were no audiences, and we'd have little spurts over the next 2+ years where there'd be a little spurt where there'd be some audiences. And then, obviously there was a lot of virtual, which was not the same as a speaker who has the passion to be in front of other people. It's just not. And that's okay. Useful belief. It was what it was at the time. But I had a number of things that happened in my personal life that I did go through. I had been through a divorce. I had also then COVID hit, then business blown up. That amplified probably some of those personal things that were happening behind the scenes. I moved up to Queensland. Well, I then fell in love with the amazing Amanda Stevens, who I know you've also had on your podcast. Somehow we are now engaged, living together in Noosa, and going to get married. But there was a time in late 2021 where Amanda became very sick, and she got something called septicemia. And when you mention to people about septicemia or sepsis, it's amazing how many people have actually gone through and know someone who went through. Now, again, she barely survived this, and she did survive it. And it was just an incredible time. There was a time I looked really, and I just threw my hands in the air and I said, you've got to be kidding me. Because through COVID and border closures, that sort of ex-divorce relationship got much worse because we were locked away and there was all sorts of different things going on. It was, we had kids in year 12, and it was, it was not easy. And then on top of that, the speaking industry gets blown apart. So my income gets blown apart. And then my partner almost dies. This brand new person that I'd fallen madly in love with. And all that happened. I was locked up by myself in Melbourne, and Amanda was in Queensland. And anyway, I remember for the first time, Andy, I said to myself, I mean, there I was the whole time through COVID going, come on, this is a reality. What's useful belief about it? Useful belief about it. And for the first time ever, really, this motto that I have lived by, I was struggling to make work. I was mad at numerous people. I was mad at the government for not allowing me to go to Queensland to see my partner who almost died. So that was, I was mad about border closures. I was mad that my business had been blown apart. I was, I found myself really frustrated and really angry. And you know what? I actually started to lose perspective about those 6 areas that I talked about. And, the truth is, when you're locked up and you got 5K radiuses and 9 p.m. curfews, and you're locked up by yourself, and you're watching movies with your kids, and they got to leave at 8:30 because all their high school stuff's at another house, and they can't be out past 9. And there was a lot going on, and I couldn't get useful belief to work. I was struggling with useful belief. I was just angry, and I have to say, you know what? I was actually out on the porch talking with my oldest son. It was the University of Melbourne. And he said, Dad, you keep having these moments where you're trying to come back again. And then he goes, then we get locked up again. And then I see you trying to come back again. And he goes, you're trying to climb this ladder to get back to where you were. And I said, yeah. He goes, do you ever think that, I don't know, like maybe you don't need to climb the same ladder that you've already climbed? Maybe you need to climb sort of a different ladder, or to climb this one in a different way. And at that exact moment, I realized that I was just trying to get back to something that I had, and I wasn't actually thinking about what it is that I want to go to. And this amazing moment happened, and I started to write. I wrote a book called Reignition. How to find power when you feel flat, tired, and uninspired. And the book Reignition is all about the fact that I worked something out. Useful belief does work. It works unbelievably. However, it's the 3rd step. I always thought it was 1 step because I was motivated intrinsically enough to go, you know what? What's my useful belief about this? Come on. But I couldn't. And some people can't. And by the way, grief is real. And grief's a big, important part of the healing process.
Mm.
So what's most important to understand is there are 2 steps that happen before useful belief will work for you. Are you ready, Andy?
Go for it, mate. What are they?
Number 1, acceptance. You must accept the reality. Now, again, there I was, angry with everyone, mad at the world. Well, guess what? I was blaming people. I was in blame mode. Blame, blame, blame. How could this happen? I was in a victim mode. And I mean, I'm not a person who goes into a victim mode, but sure enough, there I was. But acceptance, that's step 1. You've got to accept your situation. And once you realize that, okay, this is the reality with the ex-partner. And yes, this is the reality that we're in with the pandemic. And yes, this is a reality that I'm in right now, that I can't get to Queensland and I can't be with Amanda. Then guess what? You look at all that, and your son looks at you and says, Dad, you need to start climbing the ladder moving forward. And if it's a different ladder, or it's the same ladder, but climbing in a different way, all of a sudden I go, bang, you know what? I'm accepting my situation.
Mm-hmm.
The second step is total radical responsibility. Total radical responsibility. And this was the incredible thing. Once you accept your situation and take total radical responsibility for your behavior in that position, guess what works? Useful belief everywhere. Now, again, if you don't take total radical responsibility, and you're out there blaming everybody else, there's no way useful belief's going to work for you, right? If you're in a victim mentality. But here was the coolest thing I realized about taking total radical responsibility after blaming something, was I was free. And that is you know what? If that's the one thing that anybody listening to this podcast takes away, we all sit there and they tell you, we tell people a lot about trauma, a lot about the past. We have a lot of people that sit in trauma, and they spend a lot of time obsessing and reliving over and over and over and over again bad things that have happened to them in their life. Bad things do happen, and bad things happen to really, really good people. But here's the thing. Just because they happen, we can accept them and take total radical responsibility for our role in where we're going to go forward. There's 2 time zones we control, now and into the future, and that's it. Bang, and we can reflect on those things, but be clear about this. Here's a useful belief. Every single thing that happened in your life happened for a reason. Every single thing happened for a reason, and it led you into this room today. And this room today is the exact room you're supposed to be in to launch the rest of your life. Every one of those things made you stronger. And, when we start to identify that, and I'm going to take total radical responsibility, Andy, you talked before about motivation. You know what? You know how many people are out there right now looking for a silver bullet? You know how many people are out there going, oh, maybe this speaker can give me the answer, or maybe this book can give me the answer, or I don't know, maybe if I have love, if I can just find someone to love, I'll have the answer. Or back to your original point about high performance humans and success. Are we sitting there saying that car will make me happy, right? That $1 million will make me happy. That house will make me happy. The thing about total radical responsibility is when you take responsibility for what you want, and you're absolutely clear about your reality, and you're clear about those 6 areas I talked about and which order you want them to be in, and you're clear about what you're doing, man, put some useful beliefs on and watch it go.
Seriously, man, it's making me want to go and bloody take on the world. I'll tell you that now. I think where the huge connection that we can make then with this, when we're relating useful beliefs to high performance humans that are out there right now, I think it's safe to conclude then that high performance humans are acting with a sense of freedom beyond those that aren't performing as well. They're acting with a sense of freedom in their minds, in their hearts, because they are taking the total radical responsibility that Chris is alluding to, whether it's consciously or unconsciously. They are, because they've got that absolute accountability to everything that's going on in their lives, it gives them an agility to work and act and feel and be with a level of freedom that, and I think that freedom is something that a lot of us don't have because of the fact that we hold on to emotions like resentment and guilt and shame and all those sorts of things that are all pinned to the past. They're all pinned to those previous experiences. But I think that's a perfect one to start with. have that useful belief is everything happened for a specific reason, and it put you on the trajectory of your life that got you to this point right now. Whether you're in a great space or an awful space, you've still got the freedom to choose how it plays out from here. And I think that's the connection between Chris's useful beliefs and high performance humans is freedom. Is freedom in one's mind.
Responsibility gives you freedom, and it's incredible. I mean, so many people walk around and oh, if I didn't have those parents, right? If I didn't go to that school, if I didn't have that background, and or if that hadn't happened, and I mean, I look at things. We all have stuff, and this is not a competition of suffering, but I mean, I've lost a parent. I know what that's like. I mean, I've been through a divorce. So does 50% of your audience know what that's like. I went through 3 years of marriage counseling. We were separated 7 different times. We tried, Andy. We tried. You know what? And at the end of the day, it wasn't meant to be. And you take a look at all these things, and it's like there are bad things that happen. There are difficult, challenging things that happen along the way. And again, acceptance into, hey, I'll take responsibility for my role in that. I'm going to take responsibility for which got me here. And then, as I say, dun, 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 life begins at insert age. I mean, there's your useful belief, right? Life begins today. That is it. And life begins at 70. That's a useful belief if you're 70. Life begins at 53. That's a useful belief if you're 53. Life begins at 23, whatever. And the reality for all of us, I think, is that, we get so trapped sometimes in all these different memories, all these different things, which really can formulate us going down a real rabbit hole of not hitting one of your pillars, which is happiness.
Yeah.
I think, when you really focus on that past and dial into the woulda, coulda, shouldas, regrets, the blames, the shames, then it really does send us down a path where if you gave me those 4 pillars out of the gate about what you believe a high performance human is, and it is difficult to find the happiness if you're spending your time focused on bad things from the past.
Absolutely. And it's one of those ones where, and I think me coming from England and coming from a land of whinging poms and whatnot, with which there are plenty, it is legit. You can always find a problem in every solution if your mind's wide that way. If your useful belief or not so useful belief in this case
right.
is that there's got to be something wrong, or there's got to be a catch, or there's got to be something because in the past I've been burnt by X, Y, and Z, and therefore that must be the case now, and so on and so forth, then you'll forever be anchored. And you will never be able to reach the pinnacle of whatever that peak is for you. You'll always have some sort of anchor holding you back forever and a day, and you'll always be looking up in hope. But hope's not an amazing strategy game, nor is it a useful belief either, I wouldn't have thought. But having that innate ability to accept responsibility, to take total radical, I love that word, radical responsibility, to go to an extreme and take everything on board and responsible for whatever is going on in your world. Then
the flip is true too, by the way. Okay, so I talked about the past in terms of looking at negative events. There's also many, many people who live their life reminiscing about the past, believing it was better than it is now. So the other flip is they go, oh man, I wish it was still 2019 before the pandemic, right? Or they go, I wish it was 2009 before global financial crisis, or they go 96, wish I could still smoke at my desk, right? Or whatever. There's people that would fantasize about the good old days and fantasize about what life was like before the internet or before social media. And they, and they spend their life, instead of living in the moment into the future, right, still trying to climb those ladders from the past, those same ladders, which you can't climb anymore. You can't do business the same way you did it in 1996. You can't. No. And, so you start thinking about, are you ready to adapt? Are you ready to embrace the future, the now and the future? And are you ready to embrace it with a useful belief? This is the best time in the history of the world to be alive. Boom. And all of a sudden your brain opens up. Opportunities.
it really is an opportunity-rich environment. And if you want any proof, gang, you don't have to look very far. There's winners and losers in every market, in every field, in every walk of life. There's always people that are succeeding, and there are always people that are not. And the difference inherently, yes, sometimes there'll be some DNA, some DNA differences, and that comes back to the boundaries and understanding what your boundaries are and whatnot, and understanding that you're not 6'5" and can hit the rim and all the rest of it. But what you can control, and when you realize what you can control, and then you look at the landscape of what's around you and who's around you and who you're admiring and who you're respecting and who you're wanting to sort of imitate or replicating from a success point of view, or from a high performance point of view, surely you will then start to realize that maybe, just maybe, I've got the controllables that I do have can come together in a combination that allow me to get there in my own way. And again, it just circles back to understanding your own specific reality, which is what Chris started this podcast with, team. Understanding what your reality is and then accepting responsibility for that reality. The world can open up for you, team. And I don't want to get all, kumbaya and all that sort of stuff about it, but this is just useful. This is just good, solid, like countless numbers of examples of proof are in history and in and around your world. It can happen for you. And I said this to a team. I actually said this to a team not long ago. Like, you can have that many people show you the door, but if you don't take responsibility for the fact that you need to walk through that damn door, but then understand and have a useful belief about the fact that you know how to walk through that door, you got two legs, you got left foot, right foot, and you just start walking, all of a sudden the game gets interesting.
Totally.
Now, Chris,
I agree, and it is really remarkable too. I think I was going through this and talking with this woman about this process in the book Reignition, and I was talking it through. We were talking together, and she came up to me and she said, "Yeah, but you don't know what I've had to go through actually with my ex-husband." And I looked at her and I was like, "Well, you're at zero. You're not at the first step yet because you're not at acceptance." And I've been there. You're at zero, and that's okay. Sometimes you're at zero. You can listen to this, what you just said about walking through the door, and you go, "Yeah, Andy, but here's the thing. I can't walk through the door because my hands are tied. I can't walk through that door because of the obligations that I have at home. Or I can't walk through that door because of my background." And as soon as zero, and zero, right? All those, you haven't started the process. The first step is acceptance, right? That's it. Boom. I accept situation. 2, into total radical responsibility. I had this real estate agent. You talk about real estate agents. This guy's from Double Bay, one of the nicest places in the whole world, right? And this guy goes, "Oh, Chris, actually, it's a really difficult time right now selling real estate in Double Bay. It's a difficult time in Double Bay. It's a difficult time in Double Bay." I'm like, "No, it's not. It's a difficult time to sell real estate in Kabul, not Double Bay. Get yourself together," right? So again, we decide what this perception is going to be, right? You're in charge of it. You're completely in charge of it. I always say, I always tell people, "You look good today. You look good and young." And I can prove that to you right now. And they're like, "Oh, no, I'm getting old." No, I guarantee you look good and young. I could take a photograph of you right now, and I could show you that photo in 10 years' time. And in 10 years' time, you're going to look at that photo of you today. You're going to go, "Man, I looked good and young." So, here's the thing. We're in charge. Being that you're going to feel that way about your face today, eventually, you might as well go with that as a useful belief. You look good.
In 10 years' time, I'm going to look awesome.
You're going to wish you looked exactly like you do today. So you might as well just go, "Hey, I'm there." But it is amazing. And whatever situation you're in, it's I had someone come up to me talking about being lonely, and they're like, alone. I'm like, "This is the best time in the history of the world to be alone." They're like, "No, it's not." And I'm like, "Yes, it is." I said, "Can you imagine being alone in the year 1780? You'd have lived in some Northern European shack somewhere. I mean, you'd have been in England somewhere, mate, freezing your ass off. In the middle of the night, you'd have holes in your walls. The wind would be whipping through. The rain would be coming in. 3 o'clock in the morning, there's nothing to do. And you're alone. What would you be doing? Knitting some crappy sweater by candlelight. That would have been a terrible time in the history of the world to be alone. Today, there's 33 things you can do to make yourself happy at 3 o'clock in the morning. Alone. This is a great time to be alone, right? I had another guy come up to me. He's like, "Oh, I'm 55 and I'm broke. My wife left me. I'm 55 and I'm like, fantastic. This is the best time in the history of the world to be 55 and broke. If you're 55 and broke." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Well, can you imagine being 55 and broke in 1930? I mean, are you kidding me? Right? Well, the Great Depression, the Great Depression going on, you're 55. You'd have had 4 years left to live on the planet. Right? Are you kidding me? If you're 55 today, you got 40 more years to live on the planet. So pull yourself together and let's go make something happen." Boom. Opportunity everywhere. Whatever your situation is, change it. But if you're not going to change it or can't change it, come up with some pretty strong, useful beliefs.
And gang, I think that is a spine from which you can launch yourself towards becoming a high performance human if you're not already there. And if you are, I reckon you give your useful beliefs a small review, or even if you'd not realized that you had them, identifying them could perhaps be quite an empowering little exercise. So gang, I'd encourage you to do that. And what I also would encourage you to do, head down to the show notes, make damn sure you connect with this great lad, Chris Helder. My word is he is inspiring, he is motivating, but he wants to do it in a practical way, gang. He doesn't want to do it for shits and giggles. He wants to do it to make sure that you actually take some useful beliefs away with you that you can then launch forth and go make whatever success looks like for you come to a reality. Chris, thank you so much, man. The time that you've given us, the energy, the insights are incredible.
New book right here, Andy. That outlines that process of responsibility, outlines that process into useful belief. It's called Reignition, and went to Amazon #1 within a week. So in Australia, so that was pretty cool. Just right now, it's so easy for so many people to get sucked into tough times. These are tough times. And we're told and we're hit over the head every day that these are tough times. The media, be careful what you're putting in what you're paying attention to. Be careful how much you're actually just scrolling through, getting news and getting, really decide. I think a big part, what's useful and what's not useful, right? And really having that division in terms of the information we're consuming, the process we go through every day, and also the people we spend time with, because there are toxic people out there that make us feel worse about ourselves after we spend time with them, and really decide, who's useful as well, who's useful, and who are the people that are going to help me grow. And hopefully this podcast will help people grow.
I'm sure it will. Chris Helder, thank you so much, gang. Make sure you connect with him. We'll put the link to his new book, Reignition, in the show notes as well, so that you can grab yourselves a copy of that. Chris, thank you so much. Team, thank you so much for listening to this new episode of the High Performance Human podcast. We really appreciate you being here. Of course, make sure you please stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, and we'll look forward to catching you in the next episode. Take care, gang. Thanks for coming.